Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manuel Villa, and welcome to today's Latino Heritage Month event titled State of Young Latinx in New York City with Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. This event is being brought to you by the Office of Student Development and Leadership, Lambda Upslion Sorority Incorporated, and the Student Association. Please use the comment section to ask questions when we get to the quick Q&A part of this event later on this afternoon. And now, I would like to introduce to you Andrea Buzon. Andrea is the current president of the MOO chapter of Lambda Pi Upsilon Sorority Incorporated and the chair of Greek Life for Student Association. She will be introducing today's guest speaker. Andrea, take it away.
Hello. Thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone who is joining us today. I'm Andrea Buzon. I am a current senior at Queens College with a major in psychology and a minor in business. Aside from being a student, I'm also an active leader on campus for the Student Association within Public Relations and Greek Life. I'm a mentor for Crear Futuros, partnered with the Hispanic Federation and the Office of Student Life and the Vice President's Office as well, where we are dedicated to boost retention rates and graduation rates. Additionally, I am an hermana of Lambda Pi Upsilon Sorority, Latinas Poderosas Unidas Incorporated. I serve as the president of my chapter, the Mesmerizing Me chapter, centered in the New York City metro region, which encompasses schools such as John Jay, Hunter, Queens College, and more. So without further ado, I'm going to be introducing Ruben Diaz Jr. He first entered public office as a member in the New York State Assembly in 1997 and is currently serving as for his second full term as Bronx Borough President. The Borough President Diaz has proven himself to be a fearless and tireless advocate for justice and equality for everyone. As a defender of the environment, he's leading voices against environmental racism and injustice, while helping lead the fight to restore the Bronx River. The borough president has also implemented several bold health initiatives, which aims to make small changes, leading to the greater health improvements in the long term. As a graduate from Lehman College, from the City University of New York, with his bachelor's in political theory, the Bronx Borough President Diaz is also the recipient of an honorary doctoral degree in civil law from Berkeley College and Mercy College, as well as a doctoral degree from Metropolitan College of New York. As a lifelong resident of the Bronx, the borough president Diaz lives in the Southeast Bronx with his family. So without further ado, it is an honor to present the Bronx Borough President, Mr. Ruben Diaz Jr.
Thank you. Andrea, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I just want for that wonderful introduction. I want to shout out Emmanuel as well as Dwayne Johnson, who's been in contact with my office, Justin Sanchez. Greetings from the Boogie Down Bronx, y'all. I know we're talking to Queens College. I really appreciate this opportunity. Before we get into our conversation, I want it to be a back and forth, a chat. Let me just say a couple of things. You heard a lot in that introduction, but what a lot of people don't know about my biography, and just to keep it, as we say, from keeping it 100 real, people don't realize that I'm a Puerto Rican kid born and raised in the South Bronx of Puerto Rican parents. My mother came here at the age of 10 with my grandmother and her siblings. They went to Washington. My father was honorably discharged from the Army. He came to Brooklyn. They both worked in the garment district in adjacent factories, and during lunch break, they met each other. They fell in love, they started a family, and then they came to the Bronx. So a lot of people don't realize that Puerto Ricans, when they first came to New York City, first came to either Brooklyn, the Lower East Side, Upper Manhattan, and then to the Bronx. I was born in NYCHA housing projects, more houses. I'm the youngest of 3 siblings. I went to public schools, PS5, PS31, High School 149, all in the South Bronx. I went to Lehman High School in my senior year, chasing a young lady who I was madly in love with. I transferred over to Stevenson. 31 years later, that young lady is still my girlfriend and my wife. Two men who are already out the house, so we're empty nesters. I got introduced to politics at the age of 7, when my father first ran for office for the New York State Senate in 1980. He ran 3 subsequent times. In 1994, I decided that because young people were not being considered and they were not part of the conversation, at the age of 21, I ran for district leader. I won that race against somebody who was there for 23 years. So 2 years before I was, at 22, I decided to run for the New York State Assembly, got my butt kicked. And at 23, I became the youngest member of the legislature. I was there for 7 terms, 13 and a half years. And in 2009, when the former borough president worked for then President Obama, boy, do I miss that guy. Talk about some of that.
You're right.
I became the 13th Bronx Borough president. And so what I want the conversation, and people can ask me all kinds of questions. I prefer to do it that way. But during this, I gave you that part of my narrative so that those who are tuning in, whether they're in your sorority, whether they're in a frat chapter or the student government body there, as we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, whether you consider yourself Latino, Latina, Latinx, whatever it is, I'm one who prides myself of not only during this month, but every day of my life, learning about those individuals whose shoulders I stand on. So it doesn't matter who you are and what you want to do. If you want to be a scientist, you should know that people like Ellen Ochoa is a Nassau, who's the director of the Johnson Center. If you are somebody, be a thespian who wants to go into film, yes, we know people like Jennifer Lopez and others. But wait for that, you have Jose Ferrer, who did Cyrano de Bergerac in the 1950s and won all kind of awards for that. Look at Rita Moreno. For somebody like me who got involved into politics, I stand on the shoulders of the Herman Badillos, the Ramon Aceveles, the Helena Valentins, the Antonia Pantoja, Evelina Antonetti, Olga. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so as we have this conversation, I'm looking forward to, some current issues and maybe, some of the concerns or questions that you're going to ask me. But I also want this to be a celebration about who we are in general and whose shoulders that we stand on so that we know where we're going.
Right. And that's as real as it gets, right? So especially for celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15th to October 15th, it doesn't just stop there, right? It keeps going. And always be proud of what it is that we're talking about for today, for the rest of the year, and for what else is to come, right?
And to pass it down to your children or to the young people in your family, the same way that my parents, passed it down to me. I mean, look, this is a celebration of those that were before us and paying homage to them. But it's also a celebration of the fact that as Latinos or Latinx or, obviously there's so many different terms that are acceptable or not acceptable to so many different people. And that's the beauty of it, that we are not monolithic, that there's so much flavor, that Puerto Ricans have, while we're Latinos and Hispanics, we have a different flavor than Mexicans, than Dominicans, but we all have our little idiosyncrasies. We share the beautiful, language of Spanish. We may pronounce words in a different way, but we have like little things like, like there's so, when I say this, it runs across different communities where like your abuelita, how many of you remember your abuelita who had plastic on the couches that you slept on and got stuck to it, right? And like all abuelitas, no matter what, had that. Or, how about your mother or your abuelita who has rice? When they cook rice, they put it in that green cracker, aluminum can. And then they scoop it up with a real, coffee or teacup with the broken ear. Or the wooden spoons or forks that you see on the walls in the kitchen. Like, these are all the little things, that make us so proud and give us so much flavor and energy. And it's always good to have this kind of conversation so that we can not only embrace that, not only do we pay homage to those who came before us in our respective fields of interest, but also how do we push forward to make sure that as agendas are being formulated, people are taking leadership positions, that we are absolutely at the table with full consideration, with full respect that we merit and deserve in this country and beyond.
Most definitely. And thank you for that start. I guess as an overall, we can say no matter how diverse it is, we're always unified through what it is, what our core is. So definitely thank you for that. And I'm definitely looking forward to the questions and the discussion that we are going to have. And I believe we can start off talking about education, right? So something that we'd like to bring up for you is, what are some of the biggest challenges that the Latinx youth are facing in terms of education?
I could do a whole program. I could do the whole hour just on this alone. But let me try here, and let me try not to be so long-winded so that we can get, if there's follow-ups or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that, we get shortchanged on resources, number one. Part of that, look, right now we're in the middle of the census count. This is something that's mandated by the Constitution every 10 years. And if we don't answer or apply or submit our applications for the census, we don't get the adequate resources. It's like the equivalent of you doing a quinceañera or sweet 16 or a wedding. You send out invites and you're waiting for the RFPs. If you send out 100 invites, but you only get 60 RSVPs, you're only going to prepare for 60 people. But what happens if 100 people showed up? You're not going to turn those other 40 people away. That's what happens with the census. So please, if you're out there, fill out the census so that we can get the adequate resources. But it's also politics. And a lot of the politics is that there's just some people in leadership who don't feel like we should get the same type of resources than other communities. And so the question is, what do we do about it? How do we get involved politically? How do we get involved civically so that we can push forth an agenda in the same way that people before us, like Rina Antonetti, who created an organization called the South Bronx Parents. You have people like Antonia Pantoja, who created a leadership academy called Aspira. Some of the most famous aspirantes are people like the actor Jimmy Smith, like the former Democratic nominee for mayor, Fernando Ferrer, Ninfa Segarra, so many others. So that's one of the obstacles. The other obstacle is that, in my opinion, the public school system is antiquated in terms of teaching to the passion and the interest and the talents of so many of our kids in our communities. We're so talented. Talent is pervasive. It is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And so opportunity has to be given to our kids at the school level. And yet here we are still, teaching to an agricultural society that is so far beyond us. So, I mean, I can keep going and going and going, but one of the things that I've done as the borough president is, if you look at the amount of capital funding over the last 11 years that we've allocated, the overwhelming majority of it has gone to schools. It has gone to tech. It has gone to labs, science labs, media labs. It has gone to even doing funky things like creating hip hop studios or music studios so that people can integrate or intermingle education with music, which so many of our kids love, because music is in our DNA, So just things like that.
Definitely. And that definitely brings us into our next question. So it's, how should we be looking to tackle these widening education gaps within our schools? So you definitely touched upon how to implement a lot of these programs. Do you have any other additional suggestions to widening the education gaps?
So when you look at any movement, when you look at any big issue, sometimes you read about the leaders. Usually they're older people. But whether it was Tiananmen Square in China many years, a few years ago, it was youth. Whether it was the march on Washington in 1963, yes, we hear about Martin Luther King Jr. But look at John Lewis. John Lewis was 23 years old at the time, and he gave a powerful speech. Of course, it was overshadowed by MLK because MLK is, we know history. But it's always young people. So one of the things that we need to do is not let people get away with making decisions at the Department of Education or at or City Council or up in Albany, the New York State Board of Regents. People should know that all of these things exist, and we have to be the squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. And young people are so more precocious than I was when I was younger. You guys are so much more intelligent, so much more vocal. You have social media at your disposal. You guys are hitting the streets. Like, it is just so powerful. Like, this is the time now that if we say Black Lives Matter, if we say Me Too movement, that we're talking about systemic racism and injustice. So education and economic development, which we'll talk about, I guess, as well. But that's also the fundamental block of making sure that we concentrate on systems, that we concentrate on institutions that are unfortunately already set up where it puts our kids at a disadvantage. We cannot tolerate that no more, but it's predicated on you. Yes, you have elected officials, you have leaders and so on and so forth, but you have to be the force and the energy behind that leadership.
Right. Thank you for that. So I know that you have seen a lot of areas of education. As from your bio, you know, you've seen some CUNY, some other types of colleges, some privates as well. So as a CUNY alum, how do you think that CUNY can help prepare students for the real world? Or what type of policy initiatives do you see or do you think that could benefit CUNY students as a whole?
So I'm a CUNY twofer. LaGuardia Community College and Lehman College. So go CUNY, you know, hey, clap it up. And I'll tell you one thing, no matter no private university system, no matter how expensive they are, they have nothing on CUNY. And let me just speak from my personal experience. So Hilda and I, we had little Ruben when we were teenagers. And I'm a young dad at the time. I'm a young husband. I'm working at first at Farberware. Then I became a messenger at the city council. And through it all, I'm taking courses here and there. So number one, CUNY was affordable, right? Number two, sitting every day. If you go to LaGuardia Community College or Lehman College, and I'm sure Queens College, the people that I sat next to taught me way more about religious differences, about cultural diversity, about economics, you know, sitting with folks who were non-traditional students like I was, sitting there because they have grandkids. Some of them were grandparents. Some of them were parents. Some of them, you know, most of them were the first to go to college in their families. And so fast forward, when I become an elected official, this is no disrespect to my professors or the quality of education, the formal education I got, but becoming an elected official representing the borough of the Bronx, which is so diverse, as its president, you know, a lot of the lessons that I learned from the people sitting next to me were much more valuable in my everyday experience than anything that I learned from the textbooks. So that's one. Like, that's, if you don't get that at Harvard, let's keep it. There's no disrespect to Harvard. You don't get that at at any Ivy League school because the diversity just isn't there. So I sat next to Muslims, I sat next to Hindus, I sat next to senior citizens, I sat next to poor people, I sat next to working middle class, I sat next to parents, to grandparents, I sat next to people who had to make that determination whether to pay for books or make copy of the book, of the chapter because they couldn't afford the book, right? I don't want to give anybody away. I'm guilty of doing that once or twice. So that's one. The other thing is CUNY is the City University of New York.
Right.
And for me, what that means is that New York City, the mayor, the city council has to do more in terms of, obviously there's an investment in CUNY and there's an investment in the student. We need a good rate of return on that investment. At the same time, check the other box of making sure that CUNY graduates have a light at the end of the tunnel. So what do I mean by that? The mayor of the city of New York alone, with all its agency, is an employee to over 350,000 people. How many of them are CUNY grads? When you look at the hospital system, how many nurses from Lehman College's nurses academy are being placed there? When you look at Baruch, which is also CUNY, finance, Wall Street benefits from tax breaks and everything from the city of New York. How many Baruch students are being placed and hired at Wall Street? That should be mandated. It's a way for us to be able to reap the benefits of our investment as a city and CUNY, but also to give you guys the opportunity, to give a CUNY student the opportunity, so that when you graduate, you're going to have a job at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
Conversation that really needs to be had. I'm sorry I get so long-winded.
No, that's great. And it definitely gives a good background to the people who are watching that aren't too familiar with the CUNY system. So that's a huge plus side to it. So thank you for adding everything that you did. And I guess it brings us into what kind of policies and procedures do you think that the city of New York can offer to the Latinx community seeking opportunities within education, such as internships, scholarships, or even just help getting into the higher education?
Well, that's my point, right? So obviously, people always ask me, Andrea, what is the Latino community or Latinx community? What is it you guys want? We want what everybody else gets. There's no, we want opportunity. The same way that my parents was able to get opportunity, the same way that I was able to get opportunity. We don't want, and I don't know, I'm Puerto Rican. I don't know if other communities say this, but there's a saying in our community, ay bendito. like, oh, poor little you. No, we that ay bendito attitude. What we want is a fair shake. Put resources into our K through 8, first of all, so that we're prepared when we go to CUNY. And then at CUNY, make sure that you have the curriculum that teaches us to the jobs of today. Forget this job of tomorrow. And then the way you do it, the way you implement it is, number one, you get all of these different institutions or silos of the economy, like the tech, get some of the experts to work with the CUNY system to create the curriculum so that when you graduate in tech, you're prepared to go to a Google, to go to a Facebook, to go to and work, on Instagram, and so on and so forth. And by the way, those are just the big ones. In the city of New York, we have so many tech startups. They employ 400,000 people in New York City. But you know what? They're getting them from other states. No disrespect. They're getting them from other universities. No disrespect. But we want our fair shake. That's one. The other thing, one of the things that we've done in the Bronx on economic development is, if you want to do business in the Bronx, you have to do business with the Bronx. So, okay, you want to develop a building? Okay, who are you going to hire? Where are you going to buy your material? Where are you going to, you understand? So we want you to get the material from businesses in the Bronx. We want you to hire people from the Bronx. The same thing the mayor of the city of New York can do when they're dealing with developers, when they're dealing with the financial world, when they're dealing with Wall Street, when they're dealing with the film industry, and so on and so forth. You want to do business, you want a permit in New York City, then you got to hire from the CUNY system. You got to hire graduates from the CUNY system. You got to set a goal. And so that, whatever, 20, 25, 30%, whatever the number is of your hires are from the CUNY system. To me, that's a policy that will go a long way in ensuring that not only people are more interested in going to CUNY, but feel like they're going to be rewarded and they're going to be able to provide for their families and have the opportunity to live the American dream as best you can.
Definitely. I appreciate that 100%. And I know that students all over the CUNY system and beyond appreciate that as well. And I guess that brings us into, well, as a first generation student myself, I would like to know if you have any overall advice for the Latinx community who are first generation within a Spanish speaking household, because I know for a lot of students, being first generation, it's hard for them to fill out certain forms or to get that help. And so do you have any advice?
So number one, don't do what like my mom. So I'm second generation, and don't stop speaking Spanish. Sometimes when I was growing up, we made a mistake at the time. You had bilingual education, and it was almost like your parents and your grandparents. They were ashamed. They were ashamed of, I don't want my child to be in bilingual education. Mm-hmm. So we were like, it was pounded into us that you really had to get better at English, and frowned upon. So even though my parents spoke in Spanish, we answered in English. And somewhere along the way, as a teenager, I kind of lost my command of the Spanish language. And, and I try, estoy haciendo lo mejor posible como un adulto, pero como quiera, yo lamento mucho que perdí de hablar el español como teenager. So don't lose command. We're going to be the majority in this country, and the world has continued to shrink. And Latino and Spanish speaking is going to be needed more than ever. And so if you're bilingual, we should be multilingual. So that's number one. Number two, try to have patience with the adults, with your parents. Don't diss them. Don't, because now, you're hanging out with friends and this and that. And your mom or your grandma, your tío, your auntie, your titi is from another, era, from another country. And they don't have the command of the English language. Them English, and also then step up and be the advocate, not only for your family, but for that community, because no matter whether they're citizens, undocumented, whether they have a full control of the English language or not, they have rights. And so now, you know, you don't have the luxury of being selfish. You're getting an education. You're blessed. No matter how hard you think you're going through now, you never ever, and I'm talking to everybody. I'm not talking to you, Andrew. I'm talking to everybody. You will never ever face the hardships, the anxieties, the poverty that the people of your family face in their country. So you are blessed. And so now is the time for you to step up to be their mouthpiece.
Amazing, completely amazing. I think I speak for everyone. I want to thank you for that specifically, because there's so many first generations out there that tend to lose that focus. And, you know, we also do it for for the generations before us, for our parents, for our ancestors and things like that. So thank you so much. So that was a really good wrap up of a little snippet of education. So let's get into jobs. I know a lot of people are interested in wondering about hearing about the job rate market right now. So given the high levels of unemployment because of COVID, can you talk about what impact COVID has had on the Bronx jobs and how we can gain them?
COVID has totally decimated us in the Bronx. And I say that because the little old Bronx, when I first took office back in 2009, our unemployment rate was the highest in all of the 62 counties in the state of New York. We were at about 14.2% unemployment. And one of my initial charges to the Bronx Overall Economic Development Corporation, working with all my colleagues in government, is like, we have to create jobs. We have to, you know, again, so going back to my statement about developers and people who want to come here, and, you know, I know developers and real estate and all that becomes a word that people want to stay away from. We have to engage these people and say, look, you had enough. Ya se acabó el jueguito. You guys get money. That's fine. We have to develop things, but you have to do it with us. So we work with the real estate world, with development, with the healthcare industry, with the film industry, with the produce market, with the nightlife, with everything. And we went on so COVID hit in March. February of this year, we were at our lowest unemployment. We went from 14.2% back in 2009 to 4.6% in February. Now we at about 25% unemployment. So we're worse. We almost double where we started. So COVID has taken a lot of life. COVID has created a lot of sickness, but COVID has also decimated our local economy. And you see a lot of food insecurity, and you see a lot of people really trying to find a way because industries have shut down. But you know, as we move forward, we have to keep our eye on the ball, so that, you know, the government should not be bailing out corporate America, should not be bailing out airlines, should not be bailing out the financial industry. The government should be bailing the people out. When you talk about the rents, cancel the rents. When you talk about, you know, job creation, we've got to make sure that as the economy and industries continue to open up, that government is there to incentivize those people to hire our folks. Especially those folks who pre-COVID. So in the Bronx, we had in February 117,000 more people working than the first day that I took office. It was the highest employment participation in the history of our borough. Phenomenal. We had, you know, it wasn't perfect, but but people were really looking at us. And so now a lot of those people were not treated so kindly prior to the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, then all of a sudden they're essential workers. So we got to make sure that we treat those essential workers, because they put their lives on the line. And then we got to make sure that they get back to work, that their layoffs and everything, that they get first dibs. And then lastly, I know that, you know, a lot of young folks think of certain industry as the big cuckoos. And obviously they leave a lot to be desired. But if we're going to create jobs, we have to make sure that we engage those industries and not just stop talking to them, to make sure that they create lines of opportunities for us. If not, If we stop talking to the financial world, if we stop talking to the banking industry, if we stop talking to the tech or to real estate, they're going to keep doing what they're doing, but then we're not going to, we're not going to have a place at the table.
And thank you for your perspective. I feel like a lot of people needed to hear that, and it's the honest truth. And given that you have so many statistics on it, you can see how over the years how much things have changed, and definitely. So I want to ask, so what kind of job opportunities do you suggest that the young Latinx community look into amidst the pandemic and even afterwards? I know you touched on it a little bit, but for the young Latinx community right now, how do you suggest these kinds of opportunities are given or looked for?
Yeah, obviously, if you look at the tech industry, so tech is all over everywhere, even food delivery, right? Look at things like Uber Eats. Even when you look at the trucks that deliver produce and meat, those trucks are all monitored through computers. If you go to Hunts Point Produce Market, which is in the Bronx, as I tour them, they have not only the people with forklifts and people, filling up the trucks and the truck drivers and everything, but they have a whole, they have a whole unit. It's like a situation rooms with computers. They monitor the trucks. They monitor deliveries. Everything is computerized. The bodeguero. If you want to be a mechanic, now when you go to the diagnostics for your car, that's all computerized. So learn computers, learn coding. We got to go from being just consumers to coders. That's one. The healthcare industry. Healthcare industry, by the way, there's a lot of tech in the healthcare industry as well. But healthcare now, because of the pandemic, because of COVID, healthcare is the equivalent of what securities were after 9/11. So when 9/11 happened, everything was security, looking to make sure that we don't get hit again. Everything from national security to security of a business. Everybody found a lot of opportunity and employment in those areas. Now it's going to be healthcare.
Definitely. I feel that in the future, a lot of things are going to be so robot given. It's so interesting to see how 10 years ago, none of this really existed. And then it's so interesting to see how the pace has picked up. It's huge, and you can find jobs anywhere, like you said, in tech, in healthcare. Everything is always going to be evolving, so we really have to adapt to it and learn.
Right, computer engineering, code engineering, software. All of that. That's where everything is headed. So even the robots need to be programmed, right? So who's doing that? All of the apps that we use. Who actually creates the coding? Who are the engineers who will continue to modernize and continue to update those apps behind the scenes? That's where it's all headed. Even like in my house, everything is Alexa, do this. Alexa, I better not say it too loud because everything is that. So who does that? She's already here.
To you, yep.
I said her name. Okay, Alexa, stop. All right. So all those things is, that's where the economy is going. And we want to make sure that Latinx community is an essential, not just a part of it. Forget just being a part of it. Let's think big, y'all. We got to be an essential part of that. We got to have access to capital so that we are the ones not only coding and programming, but that we actually eventually own our own apps and tech companies.
And I definitely feel, I was about to ask you, but I think this could lead into a good discussion too. It's like, how do we expand these jobs into more boroughs? But I do feel that New York City in itself, that's one of the staples, like you mentioned. This is a huge area for all the tech and all these opportunities. So thank you, because the Latinx families and communities, they may feel like they're not entitled to do some of these things, but they definitely are. We all definitely are, and we can do this together.
And we're so valuable now because remember, we live in a this world shrinks because of technology. So tech doesn't only mean that because you have a tech business in New York that you're only going to service New York City or the tri-state area. Where we become valuable is that we could do tech we could do coding in multiple in Spanish language and just customer service. You could have a tech company here that needs to reach out to Argentina, Bolivia, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Peru. I mean, you understand that's a whole half of a world. And so they're gonna need us. The question becomes, will we be prepared as technicians to answer that call? Or are we going to continue to allow for them to have the excuse, oh, but we try to get, Latino recruits, but they're just not prepared as engineers. They're just not prepared as coders. And then, so even before we get to that, we have to make sure that computers and software and coding is all that made available to our communities K-8 before they go to higher ed.
Right. Thank you. I would like to talk a little bit about economic development. So it is understood that in your term, the implementation of a new Bronx has seen economic development. So can you discuss a little bit about the development of the Bronx during your tenure as borough president?
So when we first got to the Bronx, one of the things that we did is we analyzed where we are, as I said earlier, in terms of unemployment. We were the highest in the state of New York. And we said, where is it that we can make an immediate impact? Like, we needed wins. We needed small wins first, right? Even though we were thinking big. When I say we, I'm talking about my team. I'm talking about other elected officials, the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, SOBRO, the Bronx Over Economic Development Corporation. So where we felt that we could get real wins is that we did an assessment of available empty lots that the city owned. And we saw that all over the city, we saw that all over the city, things were being built on city-owned property. So these are property that in the city of New York, the Economic Development Corporation is called the EDC, the New York City EDC. And if there's an empty lot that EDC owns, they'll do an RFP, request for proposal. We weren't even getting an RFI, which is a request for interest on that property. So when we then made an assessment of the empty lots, we said, look at all these abandoned lots. And, you guys are the owners, and you guys are doing this all over the city. It is unacceptable that you're not working with us to create a plan so that we could develop these lots. So once we started doing that, then they started doing RFIs, requests for interest. They started doing RFPs, requests for proposal. But then when a developer or someone who was able to win that RFP came to us as the borough president, I used the leverage of the office. So a couple of leverages here. Number one, if you want to build something that's different than what it's zoned for, you need what's called a zoning change. So the borough president, the community board, the city council has to vote for that. So, okay, you need a zoning change. How are you going to work with the Bronx? If you need a building number for your finances, so your address, wherever you live, there's a building number. Guess what? The borough presidents are the ones who give you that building number. And you can't get a financial loan from a banking institution without the number of the address. Oh, you need the building number? How are you going to work with the people of the Bronx? And so on and so on. You need capital funding to assist you. How are you going to work with the people? So we use those leverages. And one of the things that we did early on when then Mayor Bloomberg wanted to create a mall with his buddies at the Kingsbridge Armory, we said, pay us a living wage, $15 an hour at minimum. They said no. We said, okay, we won't give you the zoning change. It was the first time that we defeated Bloomberg in 104 of his zoning changes throughout the city of New York. So we stayed our ground. And because of that big controversy, or it was considered at the time, I got my butt kicked over it. But we stood our ground. Now in the state of New York, we have a minimum wage at $15 an hour. That all started. Don't take my word for it. Do your research. That all started because of the Kingsbridge Armory debate in the Boogie Down Bronx.
Thank you for being so transparent with that information. I definitely learned from it, and I hope everyone else did too. So I want to thank you for that. So being that all of these things have been implemented, what do you think that the next borough president should be focused on in terms of the economic development that you have touched on so far?
Wow. I think that they should try to do things like, if you look in the Bronx, for those of you who are familiar, you see a lot of construction on the Bruckner Sheridan interchange. You see a lot of development. You see a lot of construction around the Major Deegan. That creates construction jobs, but you need infrastructure in order for business to run accordingly. I think that the next borough president should try to do the best they can to get the state of New York and the governor to do something with the Cross Bronx, which is a nightmare. For those of you who don't live in the Bronx, but you live in Brooklyn or Queens, is the equivalent of the BQE. You know, so think about the BQE at its rough time. That's the Cross Bronx, like every single minute of the day. They need to do something with the Cross Bronx. We need to make sure that the next borough president needs to make sure that education-wise, we continue to have the funding and the equipment, the technology that we know now is so needed because of the way COVID hit us. We got to make sure that our population is healthy. So the HHC, the Health and Hospital Corporation of the City of New York, has to give our hospitals all of the equipment that they need. We need to incentivize teachers and nurses and doctors who are tenured and who are the better teachers. We need to incentivize them to stay here as opposed to then being poached and going to Long Island or someplace else for more money.
Right.
They need to make sure that you have a carve out so that the tech industry that is growing in Manhattan finds its way to the Bronx. We have to, the film industry, the film industry not only has to continue to do filming in the Bronx, but they have to incorporate things like the Ghetto Film School, which is in the Bronx, and hire those students who are cinematographers, who are thespians, in the work that is being happening here. So, there's a lot happening. The next borough president just has to bring all the elected officials together, continue to do that, but also collect all of the dots and continue to connect them.
Thank you.
And be fearless and like not have it,
As fearless and as open and honest as you, right?
Yeah, I mean, look.
Or even more.
From a different era. I think that now elected officials have much more of a luxury and a leeway to speak candidly and unabashedly and unfiltered more than when I started 26 years ago. So I'm looking forward to that next wave of leadership that we've been able to cultivate here in the Bronx and throughout the city of New York so they can take the level.
Right, definitely. Okay, so far we've touched upon education, economic development. Let's talk a little bit about criminal justice reform. And I know this is a huge topic, so let's see how much we can get through to it. So how does the Latinx youth fit into the national conversation surrounding Black Lives Matter?
We are Black lives as well. And don't get it twisted, y'all. Like, the fact is that a lot of Latinos come to me and they say, oh, Black Lives Matter. Everything's going to the Black community. What about us? What about us? I'm like, that is us. I'm from the African diaspora. If you look at the color of my father's skin, who's from Bayamón, Puerto Rico, in Puerto Rico, the northern part of Puerto Rico was a slavery port, right? Unfortunately. So we are that. When you look at police misconduct, police brutality, taking lives. The first time that I've ever marched, the first time I've ever met personally Reverend Al Sharpton was when not a Black person was killed, but when Anthony Baez was choked in the Bronx in the mid-1990s. I think it was 1994, 95. And you know what Anthony Baez, Puerto Rican kid in the West Bronx, a Puerto Rican guy, you know why he got choked out by Francis Lavodi was the police officer's name? Because it was Christmas time. He comes visit his parents, and he and his brothers are throwing a football. And the football was overthrown, and it hit Francis Lavodi's patrol car. So he comes out like gangbusters. Next thing you know, he's choking Anthony Baez the same way that we see Eric Gardner get choked. That's what he did to Anthony Baez. So we've been fighting this fight for years. Hilton Rosario and his cousin Anthony Vega, they were in the South Bronx. The cops bum rushed their house. It was proven that they were killed. They were shot at over 18 times. And it was proven that the bullets went from their back through their front and hit the floor while they were handcuffed. when you if you look at fast forward, people like Amadou Diallo, which happened when I was first an assembly member, African kid here in the Sami section of the Bronx. He was shot at 41 times. The Latinos, we were there for Amadou Diallo to get justice. We were there for Abner Louima. So it's all intertwined, and we shouldn't allow for people to say, oh, that's Black Lives Matter. Well, what about you guys? We're part of the African diaspora. Remember this, that if you dance a bomba, bachata, merengue, salsa, we do so with African instruments.
Right.
So we're all part of, there's so many. If you look at the 1968 Olympics, we see the images of the gentleman who win from the United States in Germany with the black gloves. Did you guys know that one of them was Cuban, not African American? He's black in skin. He was Cuban, John Carlo. Did you know that when the I Have a Dream speech in 1963, the we shall overcome. I can't sing, but the person who sang it and that march was a Latina, Joanne Baez. So Black Lives Matter includes a hip hop. I'm of the hip hop generation. You know, some of the pioneers of hip hop, Charlie Chase, Puerto Rican, Ruby D, my father's nephew. Yeah, I'm going way back now, so some of you don't may not hear these names. But Crazy Legs, a world-renowned breakdancer, Kyriaki from Rocksteady. These guys were Latino and were also an integral part of this thing that took over the planet called hip hop, and it was born in the Bronx, by the way. So yeah, we are very much a part of it, and we have to embrace it and be out there collectively so that we can erase systemic racism that hurts all of us.
Thank you. There's a lot of history built into that, and I definitely agree with you 100%. We all dance to the rhythm of the same drum, and we have been fighting this fight for so many years. And I just want to ask, how do you suggest that the Latinx continue to be allies for the community? I know there are definitely ways that we have been doing it within these past few months, but do you have any other specific areas that you'd like to touch upon?
Make sure that you and your family get counted and submit your application for the census, and do it as a sense of pride. You know, a lot of people try to scare a lot of our Latinx population into not doing the census, and that's bullshit. What you guys have to do is just say, look, I'm proud to be Mexican. I'm proud to be Puerto Rican. I'm proud to be Cuban. I'm proud of this. Show that pride, and what better way to do it by saying, we're here, we got big numbers.
Right.
The Dominican community did that well 10 years ago in Washington Heights. They use it as a sense of showing pride. Number two, register to vote. So even if your family members, your older family members aren't citizens, but you were born here, now is your time. You know, Twitter fingers is not enough. Commenting on social media is not enough. You could do it. We want you to do it, but now is the time. If you've been pissed off over like the last 4 years about, climate change, which is real. If you've been pissed off about social, about criminal justice, if you've been pissed off about how women are still treated, especially in the workforce, less than, they're given less money than men who do the same job. If you're pissed off about, education or the lack of leadership in certain areas about COVID, then this is the time now that you are actually able to voice that anger or that energy, whatever. It doesn't have to be anger. It could be that you're happy about the way something is going. But now is the time, and this is the way that you do it. And then the last thing I'm going to say is this, and we see this not only in the Latinx community, but with a lot of young people. You guys don't need to be dissing the older folks. It's okay to pay homage and revere and study. And obviously you live in a world today that's different from someone who is like 50, 60, 70, 80 years old in your family or your neighbor. And you may not think that they could ever comprehend or understand what you're going through today, but they could show you a lot. and they could teach you a lot, and they could help you avoid many of the pitfalls. So I like to make an analogy where perhaps the people who are older or have come before you may not give you the winning numbers to the lottery, but they know a lot of the losing numbers. So that this way, you know not to play those numbers, and it gives you a better chance at getting the winning numbers of life. So, in the lottery, there's like 50 something numbers. They may not know the 6 winning numbers, but they may know 24 losing numbers that you could then now throw out, and then you have a better chance to get at those 6 winning numbers. So just study them, revere them, and pay homage.
And like you said, as a huge reminder for everyone that is listening and watching, please register to vote. It is coming up very quickly.
On Friday, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Last day to register to vote so that you can vote for the election.
Right.
Remember that on the 24th is early voting to November 1st, and then November 3rd is actually is the day that you vote. But while a lot of attention is being made, is getting paid to the presidential election, understand that you also have members of Congress who are up for voting this year, members of the state legislature, and then ultimately the next year, if you live in the city of New York, City Hall is up for grabs. All the citywide offices, borough presidents are all up for re-election. The city council members are all up for re-election. And those are the people who make the actual decisions locally that affect your life either positively or negatively.
Right. And just as an FYI, so the absentee ballots, the 27th is the last day, the 24th is for early voting, and October 9th is the final day, like you said. So definitely thank you. Let's reel it back a little bit into the Black Lives Matter. So are there any highlighted program or organizations in New York City to continue this momentum of the movement?
I think the Black Lives Matter. So Black Lives Matter, in my opinion, are 2 things, right? It's about saying that Black lives matter because they do. Black lives do matter. And what that means is that people of color have been treated differently and unequal to other communities. There's such a thing as white privilege. So we have to address that systemically. Then you have the Black Lives Matter movement created by the Black Lives Matter organization. You could go and team up or support the Black Lives Matter movement if you like. But when we say Black Lives Matter and systemic racism and systemic, inequality, there's so many different organizations that you can either join or you could do your part on your own with, making sure that you do better by how you comport yourself, how you treat other people, how you teach the young people in your family, how you behave in front of them because you're their example, right. What language you use when you're talking about other communities. You can, to me, I mean, there's something that we did called Meaningful Mondays. It's just going out every Monday after the weekend to go clean up the parks, the public parks. Go clean up your park, and volunteer. Go and, give out food and volunteer. It doesn't have to necessarily be an organization, but there are so many different, I mean, everything from, in the Bronx, you have youth organizations like Dream Yard. You have so many civic organizations. I mean, if anybody has any question, if you're from the Bronx, just hit me up, and depending on, what you would like to do, we can connect you to one of them. You could just go to the community board. You could help out in the local election. So the community is not necessarily an organization, but if you feel like your community board needs more flavor, needs more diversity, and young people and Latinx or whatever it is, apply for the community board. And that's part of making sure that Black lives matter.
I'd like to point out the fact that you said, basically, I'd like to take a little bit away from it, just the fact that it does start in the house. You know what I mean? Like, even it's as small as the languages that you use. I'd love to point that out because I agree with that 100%. It's small things that you do at home. It's small things that you do with your friends. And those small things make a huge impact in the long run.
Bad behavior is taught. So one of the things that I am hoping and I'm optimistic that's come out of this whole Black Lives Matter movement, is that so many people hit the streets, but the diversity of it and so many non-minorities are out there. So what I'm hoping for is when you look at racism, that's taught. That's taught, right? So I'm hoping that when you look at all these white people who are out there marching with us, our allies, our white allies, that it's not only that they're marching with us, but if they're now a branch manager at a bank, are they going to treat Andrea now equally if you're seeking to get a loan to buy a house or a business loan to start your business? So it's not enough to just march out there. But if you are one of our allies and you are in a place where you are a supervisor or a manager and you have the authority to hire, if someone like Emmanuel comes in before you and he's a dark-skinned Latino, are you going to give him now a fair shake and an opportunity at that position? So I'm hoping that when you see all these people who are marching, that they've already accepted the notion that even if somebody in their family taught them bad behavior, that they're not going to succumb to that. And that's why they're marching. But now we need them to put that to practice, put that into action, so that if they are in a place of privilege, if they're in a place of authority, that when some of our folks now come in there, that they're going to treat us accordingly. And so for Latinos and Latinx and for African Americans and for Black people and people of color, that also is something that starts at home. The sense of worth, your sense of value. A child's sense of value starts at home. And so if you are careful with your language, if you're careful with your actions, if you teach your children that they are worth more, that they are valuable, they'll start now viewing themselves that way, comporting themselves that way, and will never, ever allow anybody to treat them any differently.
Thank you. So that was very bountiful and rich. So next, let's discuss the controversial topic of COVID-19.
Yeah.
So how has COVID-19 impacted the work for your office and its accomplishments during your tenure?
It's been frustrating because I'm one who's used to working 12, 15, 18-hour days. And the court, my office is in the Bronx courthouse. So the courthouse is closed to the public. We've been working remotely, not open. And, we try to do the best that we can with people calling and returning calls and emails and, folks DMing us. It's still not the same as allowing for people to come in and having face-to-face contact and helping them navigate the different agencies so they can get the services that they need. We, as the borough president, again, a lot of the gains that we made that took us 11 years on jobs, on development and so on and so forth, were practically destroyed in 4 to 6 months. We saw more death in our borough in 4 months than in any other in the history of the Bronx. Even when you add all deaths together, whether it's like homicide, cancer, diabetes, old age, natural causes, whatever it is, if you add all of that together, you've never seen a period in the Bronx where in 4 months you had about 6,000 deaths. So that's hard because many of our people are still traumatized. Many people are still, we haven't dealt with that. Many of our kids are now told to go back to school, and no one is really dealing with the fact that they may have lost abuelito, abuelita, or their mom or dad. Look at schools now. Many of our kids are told, okay, we're going to teach you remotely, but they don't have Wi-Fi because the city has not done their part, as we've asked them to do for years, to create a Wi-Fi bubble over our borough. And then, of course, I already touched on like economic development. I lost you there for a minute there. Did you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. Hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So what are your predictions for post-COVID Bronx?
I think that when you get something that this devastating, it's an opportunity to reimagine the way we've been doing things. So, you know, here I was. I remember as a borough president, I was trying to allocate a lot of funding to devices, lab stuff for our kids, and OMB for the first half of my borough presidency saying, "Oh, we can't allow you to finance Chromebooks or Mac computers or laptops for whatever reason." They were saying that the kids would then take them home and destroy them. And then look at now with COVID. You know, I was trying to allocate funding to New York City Housing Authority so that in their community centers we could do what was then called teleconferencing. Now we call it Zoom. Now we're doing StreamYard, right? But imagine if people at public housing development can go down on any given day and receive instructions so that they can finish their GED, so that they can have better soft skills and be ready for the job market, so that they can, you know, learn a different language, so they can learn a different skill set, plumbing or whatever, while you have an instructor in a remote location. You know, for many, many years, we've been saying the Bronx is being shortchanged on health. And so we know that COVID exacerbated many of our health issues. And we've seen health indicators, you know, at high levels. So now is the time where we reimagine our healthcare system in our borough, and how we, and also creating new industry, whether it's, you know, how we deliver foods, how we deliver medicine. Now you have telemedicine, so that our emergency rooms aren't overflowing and exacerbated. So I think no one really knows what a post-COVID, because we don't even know when COVID is going to be post.
Happen, right?
When that's going to be. But I think that now is the time to start planning so that we can start reimagining economies and services.
I know that you said there has been some aid and relief to help the hurt communities. Have you seen any in the Bronx specifically?
Well, with regards to food,
any aid or relief to help the hurt families, whether that's food.
Not in terms of, like, I haven't seen yet, like in terms of post-trauma with loss of family. The educational system definitely. I mean, we talk about, yes, education and distance learning and laptops and Wi-Fi, but what about the child who lost a family member?
Right.
How are they coping with that? That's traumatic. In terms of food, I can't complain, Andrea. I mean, with the produce market, different bodegueros and supermarkets. If you look at my Instagram, you see me delivering food with elected officials all the time. You know, the businesses have really stepped up to the plate. But what we need is aid when it comes to our small businesses and the loss of revenue. What we need is for people to be alleviated of the anxieties of not being able to pay the rent while we have a moratorium to January 1st. But a moratorium only means that come January 1st, you still have to pay back 7 months, 8 months worth of rent. People can't do that.
Right.
Cancel the rent or find a way to incentivize the landlords through reduced property taxes or something, so that they're not really harassing people for that rent because they lost their job. And even when they get their jobs back, they're only going to be able to pay the rent prospective, not retro. Follow me?
Right, definitely. So on this topic, it has been almost 7 months from our first few lockdowns that we did have since COVID. And it is seen that there's reemerging cases in certain areas within the 5 boroughs. So what do you think the next steps are to slow the spread?
I'm glad that, I mean, with all of our challenges, that the Bronx and none of the zip codes in the Bronx have been on that list. It takes discipline. It takes having a heart. It takes understanding that when we ask you to wear a mask, so again, the mask is not going to protect you from getting COVID, but we don't know who has COVID and who doesn't.
Right.
So we're doing more and more testing so that you can go out there so that you know your status. But what a mask does is if I have COVID and I cover myself, my saliva, or me talking to you and keep a 6 feet distance from you will protect you from getting COVID from me. And if everybody did that, then guess what? The disease, and I'm not a scientist here, but speaking to scientists and doctors, the disease is a biological one, and it feeds and survives in a biological system. In this case, the carriers being us as human beings. If we stop the disease from spreading, the disease will not be able to survive. It dies away. But in order for that to happen, we have to wash our hands. We have to keep distance. We have to wear the mask. And when communities are not adhering to that, they have, I guess, going to start facing the consequences with shutdowns that the governor and the mayor are referring to in parts of Queens. And nobody wants to shut down. But if you don't want to shut down, if you want to be able to go to your gym, if you want to be able to go to get a bite to eat, if you want to be able to see your family and friends, if you want to be able to do, normal things again, then everybody has to do their part.
Right. And I want to thank you for even speaking on all of these topics. Super controversial, super important, and definitely for even speaking about that within the Bronx community as well as beyond. So I want to see if there are any questions down here.
We have comments. Let me see comments.
Okay.
Can't read the comments. Like comments or questions. I'll take a couple of questions, whether they are political or not. Personal, I don't care. You tell me.
Let's see. There was one earlier.
Somebody question there.
Not seeing any. Okay, what steps in your office are you going to take to train or teach residents of how to code? So this was back when we were talking about education and jobs. So the question is, what steps can you take to teach the residents of how to code?
We've done a number of seminars pre-pandemic. We have something called Bronx Codes, which is an initiative out of my office into the educational system. What I would suggest is, because there was a lot going on there, and we teamed up with some of the tech industry throughout the city of New York. We brought them in, and they're in our classrooms. We not only provided actual hardware and equipment to the teachers, but we also found out that a lot of the teachers weren't equipped in their knowledge of the tech equipment so they can maximize the usage of it. In other words, I have a GMC truck, and it's a smart truck, but I don't know all of the things that it can do because I haven't really, taken the opportunity to learn it, but what we want is, if we're going to buy whiteboards or smart boards, if we're going to buy smart boards for schools and classes, there's so much that a teacher can do with those smart boards, but we saw that they also needed the teaching and the guidance to be able to maximize this usage of the smart board so that they can then impart that on their students. So we've been doing a lot of that, but you guys can just research, go on my website, or just research Bronx Codes, all of the tech seminars that we've done at the hub on 3rd Avenue. So we've been doing a lot of stuff, and we're hoping to do more of it once things continue to open up.
Great. And another one we have is, as the borough president, how can you change your perspective on being a public advocate for the people of New York?
I don't understand the question. Change my perspective?
Yes. So I would say maybe opening it up into a little bit more opportunities, or how are other ways to be a public advocate for the people of New York?
Well, it depends. It depends who. We do the best that we can based on who's coming at us. So let me keep it, again, 100% here. Whether it's me or any other elected official, if you are not voicing your concerns, if you are not bringing numbers to the table, elected officials have so much on their plate and so many people coming at them that they kind of approach things like no news is good news. So you can't automatically anticipate or expect for an elected official to be out there fighting for your issues if you haven't voiced them, and if you haven't done that in an organized way with more people. What they're doing is that they're reacting to other issues that people are organizing. So, you know, we all have social media. We have, you know, obviously emails. We have, you know, I'm always out and about. And depending on how many people come at me with something, then I realize, oh, wait a minute, that has to be something because it's more than one individual coming to me with, you know, whatever it is, a pothole, cleaner parks, dog poop, everything from dog poop, higher education, you know, gentrification, high rents. The list goes on and on and on. Like, there's so much. So don't automatically assume you'll be making a big mistake that in your mind you're thinking, oh, I think that, you know, garbage cleanup is an issue here, but I don't see or hear my elected officials talking about it. Well, you got to put it on their radar. If not, they're going to act and behave as if no news is good news. And don't do it only by yourself. Get other people to hit up the elected official so they can say, oh, wait a minute, I got hit up today by 20, 30, 40, 50 people about the garbage in, you know, this park or in that corner or this school or this development. And then they say, wait a minute, maybe there's something here. And then in terms of the elected officials, once we hear in numbers those concerns, then we do Zooms, then we do teleconference calls. We go and visit people. I mean, pre-pandemic, we go to do town halls. We go to an association meeting, you know, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. And the last question that we have is, as the borough president, how can you continue to run for office? So in order to change your mind to continue to run for office.
Man, I appreciate it. Next year, I will be 48 years old, and I would have been elected 26 years of my life. The only way I would have stuck around in politics was if I ran for mayor. I thought about running for mayor the last 2.5 years. I was raising money, but in January, because of deep conversations with my family wasn't feeling it. And if my family isn't feeling it, then I couldn't do it. So next year, I'm retiring as an elected official. I had a good run. I'm at peace. And I just can't wait to see all of the new, exciting, and energetic leadership take over the helm, take that baton over, and, you know, rock it to the next level.
Well, all the luck, and thank you so much for even taking up all of that, everything that you have gone through and done for us.
Thank you.
Sorry, there's one last question. How do your constituents best reach you in order to create a change in the communities?
They could call us at 718-590-3500. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter. Instagram, what I've noticed is that Instagram DM, if you inbox me on Instagram, we do much better at responding to you. But we always check our emails, and we always check our voice messages every day. Just go to my website as well. And that's the best way to contact us.
All right, well, there's everybody's information. And once again, I want to thank you so much. And I want to bring back on. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., Andrea, the Office of Student Development and Leadership, and Student Association for an amazing forum. Most importantly, thank you all for attending and participating in today's program. Stay in touch with the Office of Development and Student Leadership for more upcoming events and programs. Thank you all once again. This was amazing. Good conversation, very educating, and best of luck to everyone. All right. Have a great day.
Let me just say this. Thank you, Emmanuel, for having me.
Not a problem.
I think you have a future in journalism.
Oh, you think so?
Did a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
It was thorough, and congratulations. And I expect big things from you, Andrea, and all the people who are watching.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Best of luck. Take care.